Hello and welcome back. We're still doing hand reviews from Teamo8 member number 26. By the way, our players, they know who they are, so they watch these reviews to improve their game. Anyway, let's see what we've got here. Now, what you can't see, unfortunately this replaying software doesn't show that our player in the big blind is actually sitting out at the moment. So let's see what happens. This is always a good steal opportunity. Yep, it's folded around to us, so you just need to min raise or limp in. And the player automatically folds. That's good situational awareness. I get pretty upset when I see any of our players fold the small blind into a big blind who's sitting out. So well done here. Anyway, let's move along to the next hand. Okay, here we are. We're in the big blind. Let's see what happens. Okay, a limp. We just check back a weak hand like this. Okay, a little bit of that board, not much. We want to just get by cheaply. Okay, interesting. We've turned a set. Okay, now our opponent checks to us. The thing of course, although we've made a set, there's a possible straight on the board. And in addition to that, we don't have much of a low. So really, I would prefer a check behind here on the turn. Great, our player does that. Fantastic. See, the river. Okay, we've bowed it up, but we've got the smallest possible full house on the board. Let's see what he does. Well, he bets, and he bets a bit less than half the pot. I really like this bet sizing. I like it for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it makes it possible that a weaker high could actually call here, like an overpair like aces, queens, or kings might actually call here thinking they've got a better two pair than us. It's possible. It's possible someone with ace-8, something like that, could call with their trips. But also, if someone has a really weak low on this board, like say 5-3, something like that, we might get them to fold that weak low. And by doing that, we keep the whole pot. Let's see what happens. Our opponent folds. Yeah, really good bet sizing. I wouldn't bet much more than that, because if you do, you're only going to get called by a better hand. You also run the risk of a nut low raising you off the hand, but in this case where it checked to us, it didn't look very likely that that was going to happen. So well played there. Let's move right along. Okay, here we are, one orbit later, back in the big blind. Let's see what happens. Okay, we get a free flop. We don't flop much. We want to check this. Yes, our player checks it. Again, we just want to check. Yep. Okay, the river, we've made, well, we've got a small two pair. We just want to check this down. Oh, our opponent has come out and bet pot. We have to snap fold here. We don't have a low. And 10's up is a very, very weak high hand, given that there are several straights out there, you know, Jack 9, 5, 7. We don't have a low, so we've got almost no equity in the high. And we've definitely got no equity in the low, so let's hope our player folds. Oh, and he calls, and that's a huge mistake. Forget the result. It really doesn't matter that we managed to win the high side of the pot. That's a terrible call. Most of the time, you're not going to win even half the pot, but he's called a pot-size bet to win half a pot. Again, this is something you really have to learn about split pot games, and you can't be playing for half the pot very often. You almost never have the odds. Certainly when it's a big bet like that, you don't have the odds. You've got to lay it down. Anyway, let's move along. Okay, so here we are. We've made it through to the bubble. In last place, we're on the button. Let's see what happens. Oh, and our player folds. Let's just go back to here. With less than 4 blinds in your stack, you should be jamming just about anything. And with 2 wheel cards in your hand, this fold is frankly unforgivable at this point. Anyway, let's move along. Here we are on the very next hand. We still have less than 4 blinds. We should be jamming. And our opponent does jam. Fantastic. That's what we want to see. Let's go to the next hand. Okay. Again, we didn't chip up much. We still have less than 4 blinds. So he should jam here. And he doesn't. That's a serious mistake. I mean, look at it this way. You've got less than 4 blinds. You're coming last on the bubble. You have nothing to lose. You're not in the money at the moment. You really have nothing to lose. You're about to post an extremely large percentage of your stack in the big blind in the next hand. You've got to get it in now. The small chance that everyone will fold is enough. It's worth it. And even if someone calls, you've never got 0% equity. You can't wait till you're blinded out. Anyway, let's go to the next hand. Okay, now we post a big chunk of our stack in the blind. There's a raise, and he shoves. Correct play. In fact, you know, this is a pretty good hand with a lot of straight and flush possibilities. Yeah, great lows for the situation when we're desperate. So, yep, that's a good play. And we'll go to the next hand. All right. We survived, obviously. He should be jamming here again. And he folds. Oh, no. You really, really can't let yourself blind out at this point of the game. It's an automatic jam. Anyway, hopefully our player will watch this. He'll figure out that he's been getting this wrong at this section of the game. It really doesn't even matter what your cards are, but this hand is... This is at the top end of the range when you're this desperate. That should have been jammed. Very next hand. Okay, again, he's got a jam. He's coming last on the bubble, and he's got a great hand for the situation. And he does jam at last. Great. We get that one in. Anyway, let's move along. Okay, here we are, still with the same team member. A new game now. Let's see what happens. Okay, we've flopped trips. Now, a lot of people get carried away in a situation like this and thinking, hey, we've got trips, that's a pretty good hand. Well, in Omaha, it's not necessarily a good hand. In Omaha high-low, trip deuces without having a full house or a low draw, or the nut low draw specifically, or an ace kicker, this is a really weak hand. So we just want to check this down. When this many people are seeing the flop, by the way, ace 2, the two most common cards, the most often played cards in this game, for obvious reasons. It's great for highs and lows. It's the best starting low hand. So let's see if we get down to the river cheap. Not very likely, but okay, we got to the turn. Fantastic. Now our deuces, of course, have just been counterfeited. Trip 7's beat them. So hopefully we won't get carried away. Now there's an ace. It's almost guaranteed someone has deuces full of aces at this point. Or some sort of full house. Let's see what happens. A bet, a call. Now, we know we can't. There's nothing we can beat here. Sure, some of those players in the pot are going to have 3-4 for the nut low, but someone is going to have us beat. And what does that player do? He folds. Great. That's well played. Don't get carried away. You've got to remember that you're playing a game where players have got 4 cards. If you come from Hold'em, it's far more likely to hit. Ace, deuce. If there is a ace, deuce on the board, someone has hit it. And the full house will nearly always be there. So don't get carried away with trip deuces, trip 3s, any of those small trips. You're in a heck of a lot of trouble unless you boat up. Anyway, let's go to the next one. Okay, here we are much later in the game. Our players managed to come along. We're at the second table, or the final table. Let's see what happens here. Oh, he folds. Let's go back. Now, our player has, you know, just under 6 blinds. In the 5 to 6 blind range, even with the limper, we really need to be jamming any ace small hand. Yeah, it's a mistake to lay down here. Well, not, yeah, any ace small hand, it's got to be jammed. It's unless you've got a special read that this is a super tight player. I really don't like letting this opportunity to go by because we've got a small stack. We need to chip up or go home. Anyway, let's move along to the next one. Okay, here we are a few hands later. Our player's done well to chip up, and we've pulled up a brilliant hand. Let's see what he does. Oh, and he min raises. Okay, this min raise is a mistake, especially at this stage of the game when all the stacks are short. You basically just want to jam. If worse comes to worse and all we do is pick up the blinds and antes, it's still a significant percentage of our stack. So we want to get those chips. Not only that, it'll put us up in relation to this player. In fact, it technically puts us in front of him because he hits the blinds first. Anyway, so there's another reason also for jamming this. It's not always an easy hand to play post flop. We don't have the nut low starting hand, ace deuce. We don't have any suits. We've got no flush possibilities. So really, I'd much prefer this hand to be jammed, especially at this stage of the game, when the stacks are so small. So that's a bit of a mistake. I mean, obviously, if someone jammed, he would snap call, but also jamming has the benefit that it makes it less likely this big stack is going to come in, and we'll get to play the pot heads up. Sure, you might argue we'll make more money if this guy comes in, but we'll make more money if we jam and this guy comes in. So really, no matter how you look at this hand, that should have been a jam. That's a bit of a leak. Okay, let's move along. Okay, here we are on the bubble. We've got a nice hand in the big blind. Let's see what happens. Okay, we have a funny small raise from the small blind. Let's see what our player does. He jams it in against the smaller stack. Now, even though we've got to go down here only on 2 blinds, this guy can't knock us out. We've got a strong hand. That's a good play. Let's move along. Okay, now we're in the money. Our player's got the chip lead. He's done really well to get here. On the button, pretty good hand, three-handed. Against these shorter stacks, he should jam this in. Oh, and he goes for a min raise. I really don't like this. These sorts of raises just don't make any sense. I mean, really, the only reason you would raise any less than jamming against these short stacks is if you had the intention to raise and fold to a re-raise. At these odds, there's no way we're folding to a re-raise. So what you're in danger of by doing this is that this guy here flats it, this guy also flats it, and then we've got to play a flop. We don't want to be playing a flop with a hand like this because our low is a bit tricky to play post-flop. Yeah, so really that was a mistake. Again, it's the same mistake the player made earlier. When the stacks are short in relation to the blinds, like the next biggest stack's he's got just under 7 blinds, you should be just getting it all in pre-flop. Why make life hard for yourself? And especially once you get to the point where you're multi-tabling, you're playing 10 or 12 tables, you want to simplify hands as much as possible. There's no need to create a situation where you're going to have to make decisions on later streets. You really just want to simplify things. And we're not folding, so we may as well jam. Okay, let's move along. Okay, we're back with our player again. Let's see what he does. He's in the small blind, still got chip lead. Okay, and he makes a min raise from the small blind. Look, I'm really not a fan of this play. The hand's fairly weak. Obviously, we can't make a low. But again, with the stacks this small, it's jam or fold. What if this guy calls and we have to play a flop? And in which case, we're going to be playing a flop out of position with a weak hand. We're just making life difficult for ourselves. One of the things about poker is the fewer tough decisions you have to make, the more money you're going to make, because you're going to get some of those tough decisions wrong. So why set yourself up to have a tough decision later in the hand? Again, this is a leak from the same player. He did it before a couple of times. So hopefully you'll see this and say, hey, it's jam or fold time when the stacks are small. Anyway, let's move along to the next game. Okay, so here we are. We're back with team member 26. And we're going to look at just 4 hands from this next game of his. Let's see what happens here in the big blind. Checks around, limp. We check back, of course. Okay, not much for us on that board. Bit of a straight draw, not much else. Check. Yep, check. Our low's too weak to do anything. Okay, this is good. We've made the nut high on the turn, even though we've got a weak low. And our opponent bets out. What does our player do? He jams. Now, I quite like this jam here. Reason being is our opponent didn't bet the flop. Now, there's every chance that if our opponent had flopped a nut low, he would have let out with the bet there because he would recognize that, the big blind is hardly likely to have anything in that spot. So we don't think he's got much. Does our opponent fold? He does, yeah. So that's a good play. What it does, you've got the nut high, but you're defending the other side of the pot. the low. If called, we probably can't win the low. We've got the worst possible low, 8-7-6-5. It's the worst possible low that can be on that board. By jamming it in here with the nut high, he's made sure that a weak low doesn't call and doesn't split the pot with him. That's well played. Okay, our player's done really well. He's made it through to the money. We're in third place. We've got the shorter stack. We look down here. Unless this guy comes in, if we are opening, I want to jam this hand in here. When you're coming last, you're in the money. You don't have much to lose. We've only got a short stack here with less than 6 blinds. With 2 wheel cards in my hand, I'm jamming this all day, every day. What does he do? Oh, he folds. That's a leak. Really should have jammed that one in. Okay, let's move along. Okay, we're at the next hand. We're doing pretty well. We've chipped up. We're in second place. Guy here with less than 2 blinds on the button. Let's see what he does. He jams. He should jam 100% of his hands at this point. We should fold. Oh, we've called. I understand the temptation to want to call to take a player out, but we're not, and it seems like we're getting okay odds, but the fact is we can't make a low. And what we've done, if we were calling out of the big blind and we were closing the action, this would be fine. But there's another big stack. There's a bigger stack than us who's still live in the hand. So that call, that's a leak. That's a losing play in the long run. It's costing chips for no reason. Okay, let's go to our last hand. Okay, here we are. We're heads up now. We've got the chip lead. Let's see, we're in the big blind. Our opponent raises 3 times. Now this hand, look, it's borderline between a call, jam or fold. But generally, in this sort of situation, if he'd raised 2 times, I'd be tempted to take the call. But our low's pretty darn weak. But let's see what he does. Yeah, he takes the call. That's not the worst play in the world, but we're going to be playing out of position. Anyway, let's see what happens. Okay, so we got lucky. We flopped the set. Heads up, that's fine. No problem with slow playing it here. Check, check. Okay, now things have changed quite a bit. The turn's now brought up a low draw and a flush draw. So really, we just want to end this hand right now and jam it. Let's see what our opponent does. Because, look, it's not much of an overbet. He's only got 2 blinds more than the size of the pot. If he's going to call, he's going to call. But really, we want to charge him for the draw and hopefully take him out. So we want to jam it. Okay, he's bet half the pot. This is another mistake that people make when they're not used to a split pot game. We're not denying odds to any kind of combo draw here. I mean, if he's got ace-3 of spades, he's actually in front of us. He's got more equity. Well, no, sorry, he hasn't got more equity because he hasn't got a made low. If he had a made low already, he would. But, I mean, we're not denying... Let's think about it. There are 16 outs to complete our opponent's low. 9 outs, 9 flush outs. Of course, take 4 of those away for the combination because we don't want to double count some of the low flushes. So basically, our opponent has 20 outs. This bet is absolutely pointless. You either jam it or you don't bet. There's just no point in giving favourable odds to opponent. That's a mistake. And the river, well, we've obviously copped a river card we don't like much. At least the low didn't come, but now there's straights out there on the board. At least we have a blocker to the straight. Let's see what happens. So, okay. I see this sort of mistake all the time. Our opponent has waited until it's far more likely he's beaten to put the big bet in. That's a mistake. That should have been jammed on the turn. I don't mind the slow play on the flop, particularly if your opponent has a history of check raising. I would have tried probably value bet the flop myself, but the money should have been in on the turn. Anyway, thanks for watching. This has been another hand review session for one of our Teamo8 members. If you'd like to know more about the coaching and staking that we do, check us out on the website at teamo8.com. Bye for now.